All right, you guys, we are super excited for today's episode because we have Sunny Stroeer back again. This is actually her second podcast with us, and there's gonna be a part three because we're diving into all things pre-Arizona Trail, FKT takeoff. So thank you, Sunny, for joining us. We're super excited.
Thank you for having me, Kyla. I'm stoked to be back.
Yeah. So if you guys missed our first episode with Sunny, we're recapping and kind of diving into a bit of her past history of sport and adventure. We'll link that in the show notes for the listeners to go back and listen there. But today everything's about Arizona Trail. So for our listeners, Sunny, why don't you brief us actually a little bit? What is the Arizona Trail? What's the distance? When are you taking off? What kind of climate are you going to get exposed to? Break it down for us.
Well, the Arizona Trail is an 800-mile long distance hiking trail that goes from the border of Utah and Arizona down to the border of Arizona and Mexico. And it is considered one of the marquee long distance trails in the US. I mean, of course, there's a big three that most people know about: the PCT, the AT, and the Continental Divide Trail. The Arizona Trail isn't quite as big as any of those, but it is still a really cool, really neat 800-mile route. And it just so happens to be pretty close to where I live. I live in southern Utah, about an hour 15 or so from the northern terminus. And I tried to go after a speed record on the Arizona Trail last year with support and had to come off the trail due to a stress fracture. So I'm planning on going back in about 2 days or so after recording this podcast, 2 to 3 days,
Yeah.
and try one more time to do those 800 miles, this time unsupported, which means I have to carry all of my food. And I'll be looking at, conditions that could range from really, really warm and hot in the Arizona desert, in the 70 and 80 degrees, potentially still all the way to below freezing up at elevation on the Kaiba Plateau and going through Flagstaff. So lots and
And
lots
for
and lots of different things.
Yeah, and for our listeners, she's on foot. She, she is on foot. She's not on a bike. So that is 800 miles by foot. And with regards to the unsupported, you mentioned you have to carry all your food. So for our listeners, I'm sure maybe many of them have heard of FKTs. And I think a lot of them maybe think of like stashing food or dropping food at a mailbox. But when you're unsupported,
I don't get to do any of that. I have to literally carry everything that I want on my back from the very beginning. I get to resupply water from natural sources and from public spigots, and that's about it. Everything else has to be with me from the beginning until the end. Well, I get to dispose of trash, proper trash
Mhm.
receptacles. But yeah, all my food, I need to take what I think I'm going to need. If I carry too heavy, that's going to slow me down and potentially make me drop out because I can't do it. And if I carry too little, that'll potentially, thwart my efforts
Yeah.
towards the end because I'll run out of food.
Right. And for our listeners too, so can you maybe break down what is the record right now for unsupported Arizona Trail attempt
The
or completion?
current record is 24 days and I think 3 hours. Actually, I need to go back and look at that. And it's held by Heather Anderson Anish, who is the queen of long distance speed missions. She was the first woman to hike the Triple Crown in a single calendar year. And
Wow.
she is a really, really proficient and seasoned long trail hiker. And yeah, she did it just this past spring, actually, in just over
Wow.
24 days.
Goodness. And your goal is
Well, I guess, Kyle, you and I have been working on this together, and I still have 3 days. I haven't quite decided yet what my
yeah.
actual uh, target is going to be. Certainly less than 24 days. I'm
hmm
debating on whether or not I'll take food for 21 or
hmm
22 days, or maybe
hmm
as little as 20 days.
Right. Okay. So for our listeners, there's been a lot of math happening with Sunny for this project, right? So if she has to carry all her food from start to finish for 21, 22 days out there, we have to be smart about caloric intake and all of that because it adds weight. And so how we keep her properly fueled. So yeah, so this has been a really fun, I think for me fun, but maybe I don't know what Sunny's Sunny's preparation mindset has been about this. It's been a really fun challenge and yeah, working with you, I think has been really incredible. So I think I'm excited for you. But before we kind of dive into all the trail nutrition stuff, what inspired you initially to take this on and want to do this?
It's a really good question
Yeah.
because, in general, spending a lot of time out there and going after any type of long distance speed record, I mean, in some ways it's pretty silly, right?
Mm,
Who cares really how fast you do a trail? Who cares
yeah.
what a record is on a certain route? I personally thrive on big challenges and I thrive on uncertainty. I thrive on attempting things where I'm not quite sure what the outcome is going to be. And the Arizona Trail is kind of the definition of that. I've
Mm,
done all sorts of different adventures. The last time I was on the show, we talked about my 1,000-mile journey on the Iditarod Trail Invitational. Uh, those are the types of things that I enjoy doing and that bring me joy and peace in some
mm,
ways.
mm,
One thing that I'll say about that is that I'm always looking for new and different challenges, and I'm looking for challenges that don't have a crazy amount of objective hazard or
mm,
risk.
mhm,
And that's why I really like the far out remote endurance
mhm.
with certain added handicaps, such as trying to do something unsupported
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than going off to do, crazy hard alpine climbing or
Mm,
big wave surfing or whatever else.
mhm, mhm. Wow. Okay. And then what have you done training wise to potentially adjust your training for this effort?
Well, I probably should say that when I tried this last year and I tried to go after the supported record, I was going to have to do about 50 miles a day, and I pretty much didn't train for it
Oh,
and got 300 miles in and got a stress fracture, which is not,
uh,
hugely shocking if you try to go from
yeah.
about 0 miles a day to 50 miles a day, day after day after day.
Mhm,
This year, in addition to us working together and really thinking about the nutrition very, very strategically, I have spent a lot more time on my feet in the last, 2 to 3 months. I've been carrying heavy. I've been trying to get used to the weight. And
mhm,
I'm also trying to be creative about my gear setup. So I'm actually planning on probably using wheels on my backpack, for
mm,
example, for those
mhm,
trail sections where that's permitted in order
mhm.
to reduce the load on my bones and my back a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's smart. And with the training itself and preparation, like roughly what could be a weight range of your pack that you might be starting with?
I started out training with about 50 pounds. And for what
Mm,
it's worth, I did a short dog walk actually yesterday, 2 miles with
mm,
about 48 pounds in my pack. And it felt really light, which was awesome.
yay.
But yeah, in training, I got to weights that were as much as I think 75, 78 pounds or so was the max that I carried in training.
Wow.
And then I've been guiding a good amount of backpacking trips through Dreamland Safari Tours,
Mhm.
my guide service that I co-own with my husband. And I've been carrying all of the guests' group gear
Oh my
for
God.
those trips, which the guests were really excited about. So I routinely had, 65 to 75 pound packs there. And I think that's about right for what I'll probably be looking at for the first half of the AZT while I still have all of my food supplies with me.
Mhm.
And when I have to go through stretches that at times have, 35 to 40 miles without any reliable water sources.
Yeah, yeah. Goodness. Really incredible. And also, yeah, I mean, crazy good training exposure too that you're giving yourself. Okay. And then what are some of the obstacles you potentially anticipate on the trail and how are you preparing to overcome those?
The biggest obstacles, besides just fatigue and weather, I think, are being able to fuel sufficiently to make sure
Hmm.
that I don't bonk,
Yeah.
and thinking about and proactively managing potential for overuse injuries, be that
Hmm.
another stress fracture, be that, tendonitis, be that issues like really bad chafing on the hips from carrying a super heavy pack for days
Right.
on end, right? Which I know is something that Heather, the
Mm,
record holder, was dealing with. So I'm thinking about all of those, and I believe that my training and my gear setup is a pretty good lead in to setting me up to address most of them successfully. But really, the biggest question mark and the biggest unknown for me is the food, because
mm,
I pride myself in being a really good eater and always being able to get calories down, but I'm used to being able to supplement with as much as possible from outside sources, right? So usually I
Mhm.
carry my own supplies on a trail, and then because I'm not going unsupported, I buy and I receive all that food from
Mhm.
bystanders and support and crew and whatever else. And this time I don't have that option. So
Yeah.
I'm a little nervous about that.
Yeah. Oh man. Is this your first ever unsupported?
I've done unsupported, actually, I've done lots and lots of unsupported, but
Okay.
typically shorter distances.
Mm-hmm.
All of the unsupported history that I have is usually somewhere between 1 to 3 days or 1 to 4
Mm-hmm.
days. I've never done an unsupported effort for 3 weeks. The
Wow.
biggest and closest comparable that I have is the Iditarod Trail Invitational, where I was out for 29 days, but that was supported. And I
Mm-hmm.
had all this access. I mean, I had all sorts of things that went wrong on the nutrition side, but I
Mm.
also had access to resupplies, at least every 50 miles. And I was really, really, really taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
So this is
Wow.
very neat.
Yeah. Just from a personal question, having done plenty of backpacking trips, do you get blisters when you're doing stuff like this?
Not really,
No, you're
thankfully.
just like your feet are ready for because
Yeah,
you've done so much training. That's great.
yeah.
Okay. So kind of touching on the nutrition. So we did our first podcast together, kind of just learning about you as an athlete and all your accomplishments in all your efforts out there. From that, we kind of started chatting and you're like, hey, I'm going to do this AZT. Um, maybe you can help me with my nutrition. So, what have been some of the kind of major nutritional differences in preparation for this attempt versus last year's attempt or the last attempt?
I think the biggest epiphany that I had working with you, Kyla, was that I didn't quite realize, or it hadn't registered with me, just how reliant on carbs
Mm,
my fueling strategy was typically. And when I mean reliant on carbs, I don't mean, balanced macros, but I mean, I worked with GU Energy Labs for, I think, right around 5 years as one of their
mm,
athletes. And, I still
hmm.
love GU products. I think they
Yeah.
work fantastically well. But what I would do in a multi-day or multi-week effort, like the Iditarod Trail Invitational or like the Arizona Trail last year, I would just eat goo all
Mm,
day long, every day for hours
hmm.
on end, for days on end. And it was carbs, 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 right? And then I'd come off the trail and I'd always be so surprised in a way, or I came to know what to expect, but I'd come off and be like, oh yeah, my metabolism is still in overdrive, and I'm still kind of at that same caloric intake that I had while I was on the trail, but I'd just be craving donuts. I
No.
just want to eat like 8 donuts a day. And it made no sense to me because usually that's
Yeah.
not my diet.
Hmm.
Working with you, I was like, oh yeah, duh, no
Hmm.
surprise. If you're fueling purely with carbs essentially for those multi-week efforts, then yeah,
Hmm.
your body's going to be craving carbs.
Yeah, and really efficient at utilizing carbs too. But I
Mhm.
think one of the big things we realized together through this process too was we got a lot of data from you. We got to look at heart rate data when you're carrying your pack in that temperature for those durations and what heart rate zones were you getting into and what potential fuel sources were you, tapping into at those efforts. And I think kind of a big realization we had was that we're not going fully glycolytic with the effort you're doing, right? And so we have that room. And from your gut tolerance lens, being able to put down food no problem, we have the ability to do mixed macronutrient foods. So, and with that comes kind of the what we realized was we get more calories per gram with some fat. So maybe we can get more calories at a lighter weight by incorporating a little bit more fats into the nutrition plan, which I think is going to be a big win. And you've been testing with that, which has been good as well and important in preparation for something like that. So I think that is excellent. Any specific foods or supplements that you plan to rely on for the energy, kind of topping off on that kind of comment and conversation?
Yeah, lots of nuts,
Yeah.
because of the caloric density and because of the
Hmm.
fats. So I actually, I trialed this a couple times here for my guided backpacking trips over the last month. And usually, again, I'll bring in like, I don't know, 7 or 8 units of goo per day
Hmm.
just for
Hmm.
snacks in between. And that all got replaced by just these tiny little bags of
Oh yeah.
nuts that,
Yeah.
to me, when I first started packing them, I'm like, this is insane because, it's almost nothing. How am I going to make
Yeah.
it through the day?
Yeah.
And it's working great, which is amazing.
Awesome. Yay.
But I think that's probably the biggest change. And then we talked about some supplements, creatine being one of
Hmm.
those that I'm
Hmm.
planning on bringing along on the trail. And that I haven't experimented with as much in training, right? So I'll be curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, yeah. And creatine for the listeners, one of the reasons we're using creatine for Sunny is because of if you're out there on the trail for 18, 20 hours a day and you're only sleeping for 4 hours, there is research to suggest that creatine can help when we have sleep deprivation going on from a cognitive lens. So we're using that to our advantage. We also know creatine can pull a little bit of water into the muscles, maybe it can help with hydration. So we're using that to our advantage there. So I think that will be a good one to have on board. And then talking about muscle recovery, that potentially could be a tool and hopefully minimizing lean mass losses a little bit too when we have some creatine coming in. So that should be a good one to have on hand. Hydration.
Yeah. So that's the big one.
Yeah.
That's the big one. And you had me, run a couple of sweat tests and kind of see what my fluid losses actually look like in certain conditions. Now, in general, I worry about dehydration
Hmm.
because I can only take from natural water sources, which are far and few between, and I
Yeah.
only have so much carrying capacity, right? And so
Hmm.
the idea of wanting to have, 5, 6, 7, 8 liters a day is great, but the reality of what the trail actually looks like and also how much time it takes to collect water and to treat
Hmm.
water and my experience from past endurance efforts kind of makes me think that I'll probably come in, at 3 to 4 liters a day.
Yeah.
Five
Yeah.
if I'm really lucky. And so that does concern me.
Hmm.
And I do wonder what the long-term effects, or not long-term, but for within the context of the
Hmm.
effort, the multi-day
Right.
effects are going to be of persistent
Hmm.
dehydration,
Hmm.
because I do worry that I'm going to dip into that.
Yeah. 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 That certainly is one of the things we are trying to problem solve, right? Is we can only carry so much water, and obviously the more water we carry, the more weight that means, and what does that mean too from a sweat loss lens and those long stretches, like you're saying, between available water sources. So I think there's certainly going to be certain days or situations where we're going to come in probably pretty shy, but I'm hoping with our most recent sweat test data point we just got, if it is cooler, we actually might be pretty on target some of the days too. So I think we might have some room to make up, which is great. So the more data we get, the better we can plan for that. And then hydration wise, what about electrolytes? Are you planning on doing any electrolytes? Where are you going to get those from?
Yes, planning to, bring electrolyte supplements on a
Mhm.
daily basis, and then, also rely on the salts in my food, of course. But from everything that I've learned from you, Kyla, I think that, I need those electrolyte supplements in order to try and stay balanced,
Yeah.
which again makes me wonder about last year. It was actually interesting because while I was on the trail last year, I was listening to Dr. Stacy Sims roar,
Oh yeah.
and she had a couple of thoughts on dehydration and whatnot, right? And I was
Mm.
listening to all those chapters while being actively dehydrated and not
Oh
drinking enough
gosh.
and being out on this effort and getting injured. And I'm like, ah, okay.
Yeah.
These are things that I should have gotten smart and educated on
Mm.
months ago. So I'm very, very grateful for your counsel to set me up
Yeah.
better this year.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. You get download some books for the trail. That's really smart. Man, you could go through so many books.
Yes.
That's great. You could, yeah. Wow. That's a great idea. I love that. Do you, quick question, do you listen to your audiobooks on the regular speed or do you speed them up?
When I'm out on the trail, I listen on regular speed.
Okay.
I want to make them last.
Yeah, that's smart. That's smart. Okay, so we talked about nutrition, supplements, hydration, and a little bit of potential obstacles. But have there been any challenges with regards to dialing in the nutrition outside of weight for this long attempt?
One of the bigger challenges that I've had to think about is that I will not be bringing a stove, right? So everything that I
Right.
eat will have to be cold soakable.
Hmm.
So that's been an interesting exercise for me as well because I'm not used to going without a heat source. I typically
Right.
have the ability to boil water and to make hot meals and all of that. But
Hmm.
that was one issue, and then the other issue was or is because my current nutrition strategy is so different from what I've done in the past. I've noticed that my bowel movements just have changed.
Hmm.
And hopefully that's not going to be an issue on the trail because I
Yes.
could be uncomfortable for 20 days.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Certainly, we want to make sure that is all working optimally too. So, and let's see, I kind of talking about not breaking a stove. Are there any things that you maybe would normally bring, like on your guided tours, that you are not bringing on this attempt?
Yes, I usually drink a lot of coffee, and
Mm,
I really enjoy just the coffee ritual, but I also do know that I have a bit of a physical dependency on caffeine,
mm,
just from a prior experience, prior history of going through caffeine withdrawals that I
mm,
thought were strategic for certain efforts, which presumably actually aren't necessarily. But, having gone through that process once or twice, I do know that if I just cut out all caffeine, cold turkey, that I go through withdrawal symptoms. And,
hmm.
we had talked about how to handle that on the trail and landed on bringing caffeine supplements because usually,
Mm,
even when I'm not drinking coffee, in a daily effort, I would typically have, again, caffeinated goo products with me, which I'm
hmm.
not planning on using this time around because they're just not calorically dense enough actually for what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do because I'm trying to replace, about 4,500 calories a day in order to not, lose crazy
Hmm.
weight and kind of set myself up for a bonk. So,
Yeah.
so with all of those constraints, yeah, I actually just got in the mail a bunch of run gums, which is what you had
Nice.
recommended for
Yeah.
caffeine.
Perfect. Yeah, the run gum for our listeners, and we can link that in the show notes too, has I think it's 50 milligrams of caffeine per chewable piece of gum, and there's two per
Mhm.
packet. And the caffeine is absorbed through they call it the buccal, buccal, I think, buccal cavities in the mouth. And so apparently you're able to get caffeine into the bloodstream actually faster than if it was like when you drink a cup of coffee or if you swallow a caffeine capsule, it has to actually get metabolized through the liver and then get into the bloodstream. So potentially a faster caffeine into the bloodstream. So it gets you quick caffeine when you need it. So that is a handy tool. Okay. And so cold soaking, no heat. Do you bring like shower supplies? Are we really skimming down like the bedding material? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, so I haven't actually put together my base weight yet and kind of
Mm,
the foundational gear that I'm going to need on the
hmm.
trail, but I'll have a sleeping bag, a
Hmm.
nice warm sleeping bag and, a lightweight pad, and that's about
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
And washing, won't really happen except for in critical locations.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I'm getting ready to, yeah, to be roughing it for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that my base weight is going to be somewhere around 10 pounds, probably no more than that,
Amazing.
plus about, 40-ish pounds or so
Hmm.
in food, plus up to, I guess, 10 pounds in water weight, when
Hmm.
and where needed. And now with the 10 pounds of base weight, I should say that because I'm planning to most likely bring wheels. And again, I'm still 3 days out, so I'm still
Hmm.
tinkering on some of those systems and haven't
Yep.
actually done my final checkout just
Hmm.
yet. But since I am planning on having wheels on the pack, that adds 4 pounds right then and there. So
Oh
base
yeah.
weight may actually end up being closer to 15 rather than 10
Mm.
because
Hmm.
of the wheels.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. And how does your body feel? Like when you did this last, when you wake when you wake up in the morning or when you start your day, you, like after sleeping on a sleeping pad, no pillow, it sounds like. Is it like hey, do you have to like like
Yeah.
move things around, loosen it up?
Yeah, I mean, I do get pretty stiff. I know last year in
Yeah.
particular, when I was trying to go faster than what I'll be doing this year, I was trying to do 52-ish miles a day.
Wow.
That really, that kind of pushed me into some real fatigue and real
Hmm.
stiffness pretty quickly. And in the mornings, I actually had a cot at the time because I was crew supported and folks would come in
Oh
and like
yeah.
help me with aid stations and whatnot. But I was sleeping on a cot and just trying to get off the cot in the mornings. And I go to the bathroom.
Mm.
I was like, ooh, and now I'm going to do
Yeah.
57 miles today.
Oh, wow.
But your
Gosh.
muscles lose up after a
Yeah.
while and warm up and loosen. And so,
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
mindset, and kind of know that whatever you think you can do, you can probably figure out. And if you think you
Hmm.
cannot do something, that will equally come true. So that
Yeah.
makes it
Yeah.
positive.
How do you plan to structure your sleep? I know this is something we've talked about in check-ins, but what are you thinking right now at this point?
I am going to try and just have a pretty regular rhythm. I'm
Hmm.
usually a very good sleeper and I'll try to sleep in the night and, hike during daylight hours as much as I can.
Yeah.
That said, what I've learned over the last decade and a half of doing ultra endurance, I know that if I run into extreme fatigue and if I run into any type of either a bonk or just, mental and
Hmm.
physical exhaustion, it's so much more powerful to just lay down and get a nap rather
Hmm.
than keep pushing because
Yeah.
sleep deprivation makes everything so much harder, right? So
Yeah.
I know early on in my ultra career, I tried to go and like push through the nights and, just keep going and not stop to sleep
Mm.
because it's a waste of time. And since then, I've completely flipped that on its head and completely
Yeah.
reversed it, where I sleep early and I sleep plentiful. And I find
Mm.
that that ends up setting me up for success because I'm faster during the
Hmm.
times that I am on my feet and moving.
Yeah, that's great. With the time of year we're in right now, so it's November and the daylight's getting shorter. Makes me think of headlamps and lights and stuff like that. Do you pack solar? Like I imagine you have to recharge those at some point, right?
Yeah, I will have to, and that's a big consideration and a big
Hmm.
source of weight that I'll have to carry. I'll have multiple battery packs and batteries, and I'll
Yeah.
have rechargeable, USB capacity, and I am
Hmm.
carrying a solar panel, which is
Hmm.
also one of the things that I have to, make sure is
Hmm.
working as intended today. Tomorrow, I got a
Yes.
nice lightweight, new
Nice.
panel because I have to charge headlamps, I have to charge GPS tracking, my
Hmm.
watch and Garmin.
Oh
And I want to
yeah.
document a little bit, so I'll have to charge my phone, which
Yeah.
means that, yeah, for 3 weeks, I,
Yeah.
have
Wow.
capacity.
Goodness, I'm so excited for you. Um, okay, and we kind of covered this question, balancing calorie needs with the need of your output, but also keeping the pack light. We talked a little bit about that, relying a little bit more on fats, nuts this year. And for our listeners too, we took Sunny's food breakdown for a day and we ran it through our nutrition software to make sure she was getting all her micronutrients too, because we didn't want to just eat maybe like one of the same food over and over again for 21 days and then realize we're, I don't know, in a selenium excess and a phosphorus deficit, So we wanted to run that and take a look. And all in all, things look really solid. I think there was like one micronutrient we wanted to work on. So we were subbing in some foods to kind of make sure we were hitting that. So yeah, I think we're on a good path from a overall caloric, but also a macronutrient and micronutrient lens to meet your body's needs and from a recovery lens too, I think will be really big. If we're doing lots of carbohydrates, kind of that extreme that like that you did last attempt, right? Is like there's not a lot of amino acids in there to help with muscle tissue recovery and yeah, if your muscles are getting beat down a lot every single day, and so we do want to help that tissue recovery. I think will be really important this time around. Okay, how do you mentally prepare for this consistent day after day of high output, low sleep, and big amount of fatigue coming in for this FKT attempt?
In some ways, I don't because I think about it as vacation.
Oh, nice. I like it.
But I am really excited. And I say that I think about it as vacation because I run three businesses and I have a lot of different passions and projects that I'm working on at all times. And
Hmm.
the idea of being out on the trail and only having one single objective, which is to move forward and to
Yeah.
stay healthy and safe,
Hmm.
that to me is amazing
Yeah.
and like a huge, deep breath of just mental relief.
Hmm.
And yeah, sleep will be short. And yes, I'll be exhausted, but there's a certain beauty in having that narrow, singular focus and being able to just be present in the moment. And in some ways,
Hmm.
doing pursuing a speed attempt like this is moving meditation for me. So while I'm certainly a little bit anxious about the level of sleep deprivation and, managing myself for that long. I find that I thrive in those sort of
Hmm.
circumstances, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
That's awesome. When you come off of like efforts like that, when you finish them, what is the mindset after?
Usually, it's a lot of gratitude for all the
Yeah.
little things,
Yes.
like being able to take a hot shower, being able to sit on the couch, put my feet up, sleep in a bed, walk barefoot,
Hmm.
just not be cold when I go in
Yeah.
transition in between moving and sitting, those types of things.
Hmm.
And then it tends to be excitement for future projects, but also
Mm.
excitement for my daily, professional to-dos and goals, because I find that spending an extended period of time on a trail like that with no professional purpose, essentially,
Hmm.
really sets me up to come back recharged and energized to move things and have an impact that goes beyond, just pursuing something very, very selfish and in some ways senseless.
Mm. I gotta imagine too, you must have a lot of gratitude too for what your body can do, which I mean, that's always got to feel good. But yeah,
So
go
I
ahead.
I will say, yes, I do, absolutely. And at the same time, when I tried this last year, I came off the trail after 300 miles with a stress fracture. Right now,
Hmm.
you had me do a bone density scan that all checked out well. It seems like my
Hmm.
preparation this year is a bit more solid, so I have high hopes, but I also fully know that I'm about to take on something massive. And there's no guarantee of success, and
Hmm.
there's no guarantee that I'll make it even through the first day. There's so many things
Hmm.
that could happen. So, while I love the idea of envisioning the gratitude that I'll have for my body first will have to deliver in order for me to be able to collect on that.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah, I totally get that. Okay, and let's see, we covered our mental side of things. With regard to preparation for the sleep, do you ever do any sleep banking? Like, do you try and sleep more in these next few days in preparation for that?
I know you and I talked about that, and I certainly have been trying to be mindful of it. Realistically, what happens most of the time is that because I essentially need to set myself up for a 3 week sabbatical, right, and 3 week
Mm-hmm.
break,
Yep.
I tend to sleep less rather than more because I'm closing out all of these projects and trying to make sure
Right.
that I've delivered on all of my,
Mm-hmm.
deadlines and everything else. However, I did have a couple of guided backpacking trips these past 2 weeks, and I tend to sleep a lot on those guided backpacking trips.
Good.
So that's good.
Awesome.
And I'm
Yeah.
trying to be good about sleep hygiene here the next couple of days.
Yeah, yeah, smart. I love it. Okay, and when you're out there on the trail, do you ever find moments with a lack of motivation or moments when you need to kind of find motivation and or manage maybe a moment when you're like stressed about something? Maybe what would that look like if that were to happen, and how do you manage that?
I do at times run into moments where I'm like, well, this is stupid. You know, I could be at home, I could be doing all these things, and instead I'm out here trying to put down another, 40-mile day
Hmm.
with 70 pounds on my back. Why? This is dumb.
Yeah.
But most of the time I'm so in the moment and so, immersed in what I'm doing, and so cherishing the fact that I have the ability to do this and that I get
Hmm.
to have these experiences and also see an amazing trail and amazing landscapes and spend time outdoors and really feel in tune with my body, that those thoughts don't come up all that
Hmm.
much. Now, something else that I've also found helpful is thinking about what impact adventures like this can have beyond just myself.
Mm.
And specifically for this trail, I am raising funds for scholarships for women, girls, and gender diverse adventurers to be able to access transformative backcountry experiences,
Amazing.
to help with the gender equity narrative in
Yeah.
the outdoors. So, I do know that while this is a very selfish pursuit in a lot of ways, what I'm doing also contributes to driving positive change for some other people. And
Hmm.
that is a powerful motivator as well.
Amazing. Can we link that in the show notes for the listeners to access? Perfect.
Absolutely. That'd be wonderful.
Awesome. So yeah, that will be down there for the listeners to check out. And then kind of in our closing, what advice would you give to other athletes and especially women who are looking to tackle some FKTs or even this similar Arizona Trail situation?
I would say that the biggest differentiators between folks who do things like this and do them successfully and folks who don't
Mm,
is the desire to have an adventure like that, and then the the guts or the discipline to go from, the kind of wishing and fantasizing stage to the actual planning stage. So,
mm-hmm,
once you set your mind on doing something and you're not just talking about, oh, I wish I could, but no, actually, I want to do this.
mm-hmm.
I feel like we all tend to figure out ways to make it happen, right?
Yeah,
For me, I didn't grow up as an athlete, and it's taken me a long time to get to a point where I can just say, oh, yeah, I'm going to go and try to do 800 miles unsupported. But I built up to it over time.
yeah,
And I did go from not being an athlete to running my first race, to running my first marathon, to running my first ultra, to being able to do stuff like this. And
yeah,
the journey itself is so wildly rewarding and fascinating, that, yeah, I'd say if you have a dream, if you have an adventure that is motivating you, that's calling to you, start planning. Get out
yeah.
there and go do it.
That's awesome. I love that. And yeah, I think that's spot on. And taking that action, if you really have a strong desire to do something like that and building up to it, I think is a very good, good advice. Because yeah, diving straight into 800 miles, I think would be, yeah, you might be signing yourself, unless you do loads of research beforehand, I think it would just be,
I mean, there's Cheryl Strayed, right? You've read Wild or seen the
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Well, it's
yeah,
again, mind over matter. And
yeah,
yeah, it may not be 50 miles a day, but if you really want to do something, stop wishing and start planning, and you'll figure out how to
yeah.
make it happen over time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then lastly, is there anything you're looking forward to about this experience beyond the attempt itself?
Wow. So many things,
Yeah,
just being out there and being able to unplug in a way and, really be fully focused on the moment. But
yeah.
what I'm also really, really excited about, and this is going to be completely new for me, is actually figuring out what my body feels like and how all of this works with a
Mm-hmm,
completely different diet. Because until you and I started working together, the way I fueled my adventures
hmm,
was very, very, very different. So I have no idea what this is going to feel like over the
hmm.
course of 3 weeks,
Yeah,
and I'm really optimistic and really hopeful, but I'm just excited to find out.
yeah. Awesome. I'm so excited for you. Um, This has been so exciting, and I'm excited to have you back and dive into w- how it all went and what worked and what didn't, and yeah, how you felt and how your body responded. And is there a way for us to follow you, like track, like follow along?
Absolutely.
How do
Yeah,
we
I'll
do that?
have information posted on my social media. So first off,
Okay.
you can find my website at sunnystroeer.com, first name,
Hmm.
last name.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well, mostly active on Instagram. I'll have tracking linked on my Instagram. And I believe, as this episode is airing, I'm probably currently on the trail. So you should
Yep.
be able to see something there right now.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'll have a Garmin in reach, and you'll be able to send me messages as well and check in, see how I'm doing. And I'm always a big fan of hearing from folks along the way and knowing that I'm not just out there by myself without anybody else in the world. But you'll
Amazing.
be able to see what my progress looks like on a daily basis.
Yay. Well, we'll link that below. And then what is your Insta handle for our listeners?
My Instagram is first initial last name. So that's
Okay.
Stroeer. My parents tried to make it difficult.
Awesome. Well, this has been so fun. Amanda, did you have a question?
I did. I just going back to hydration super quick. What I was curious what your capacity to hold water is. So like when you're completely full.
I haven't decided yet. I still have 3 days, but I think it's going to be probably 5 liters. That's kind of what
Wow.
I'm thinking about. Um,
And
yeah,
I know
Wow.
collecting water and purifying it takes time. What are you using to do that?
I am planning to have a Sawyer squeeze filter with me, which is kind of the ultralight backpacking standard.
Mm,
And I will also have iodine drops as backup purification.
mm. Does that make the water taste funny? The
It
iodine drop?
does.
Yeah. Mm. But it's fast.
Takes about 30 minutes and it's
Oh,
pretty safe from all that I understand. And well, 30
okay.
minutes is fast compared to
Yeah.
some other treatment options that can take a
Hmm.
couple hours. So yeah.
Wow.
Like the
Gosh.
old school way. It was like what my
Hmm.
style backpacking. I always
Yeah.
have urgency when I go.
Mm, that's smart. Wow. Yeah, I'm thinking of like the one where you're like you like do the press and it like takes forever. You're just like pumping, you have the little filter in like creek or whatever. Um, have you ever gotten any like stomach bugs on the trail from the water?
I have only once. This was in Alaska, and
Oh,
I had iodine in my pocket at the time and was taking water from an open stream, in the middle of the winter. And it was the second to last day in the race. I looked at the water and I looked at the iodine. I'm like, it's Alaska, it'll be safe. And then I thought,
yeah.
okay, and if it's not safe, I'm not going to get sick until about a week after the race anyway.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I got very, very sick about a week after the race.
Oh, is it like Giardia up there or what lives in Alaska like it survived?
It was apparently cryptosporidium,
Oh
and it was
no.
really bad. And I lost about 9 pounds in 24 hours
Oh.
from dehydration.
Oh no.
And yeah, it was not pretty.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah, you certainly don't want to get something like that out on the trail when you're already
No,
back to, yeah. Wow. Well, you got your good hydration system down. Got to stay, yeah, on top of it. When in doubt, use those iodine tablets.
exactly.
Awesome. Well, this has been again amazing. Super appreciate your time, Sunny, and looking forward to reconnecting when you get back out, and off the trail, and we will be following along. And thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm super stoked and crossing my fingers that the next time we talk is going to be more than 3 weeks in the future, because if
Yeah.
it's less than 3 weeks, that means that I
Right.
failed and bonked and came off the trail.
Right. Yes, yes. Fingers crossed, knocking on wood. We will, yeah, we'll connect in 3 weeks or more. All right.
Thank you.